I call this meeting to order, a special meeting of the York County School Board. And just as this is for September 17th, and just as a recap from last week, September 10th, we actually had to cut our meeting short, our work session short, because of the weather. The governor had called a state of emergency and evacuation of Zone A, and it affected a lot of people in this area. And of course, our schools were going to be used eventually, we knew, for sheltering. But our thoughts and our prayers are going out to those affected in Carolina, Wilmington, New Bern, and the other areas down there that have been affected and continue to be affected by the storm. So as we move forward, we continue to monitor weather, and during hurricane season, we make decisions to try to keep everyone safe. And because we cut our last meeting short due to the weather, we'll not have the presentations on the topics this evening. So I'll start with you, Dr. Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Board members, good evening, everyone. So I'm going to open this evening's meeting with the opening of school report. So we're already in our third week of school. I know we missed last week, or most of last week. And of course, we had to make schedule adjustments last week due to the impending hurricane forecast and the mandatory evacuation order declared by Governor Northam. As decisions were made, our priority as a school division was the protection and safety of our students and families. We appreciate, and I'll say this personally to Mr. Morgan and Chief Kopczynski, and Dr. James and Mr. Dolak, Mr. Bowen, and others who spent a lot of time with the emergency operations team. We met 2 times a day for the 4 or 5 days we were there, and Mr. Morgan and Chief sent us a lot of updates, and I've shared those with the board members as we were going through the storm. So their collaboration and communications were fantastic through the whole thing. Although thankfully the storm turned and avoided much of the predicted severe weather here, our hearts go out to those in other areas who were not as fortunate and are suffering great losses of both life and property. I would like to share an update related to the opening of schools. So during the first week, I had the opportunity to visit all 19 schools as well as our maintenance and transportation departments. Over the summer, our team has been busy doing a variety of tasks to prepare for a new year, and I would like to share just a couple of those. Our operations staff, we cleaned 19 schools, or 1.8 million square feet. We still have a few open custodial positions, so our custodians work long and hard to get the buildings prepared for that first week. Also, I want to give kudos to our operations staff, SBO, staff and teachers from Tabb Elementary School and other buildings for the renovation projects at Tabb Elementary. Thanks to our team who pulled together over the Labor Day holiday as we were able to get everything moved in prior to school opening. Some of the other projects completed that were shared in detail at our August 27th meeting, I wanted to share those this evening. New security vestibules at Bruton High, Dare, and Seaford Elementary School. New ceiling and ceramic tile at Yorktown Elementary School and new ceiling tile at Grafton Bethel. Interior painting of the entire building at Tabb High School. School zone light automation system off of Cook Road, and we repaved Mount Vernon's parking lot. All of the updates look great, and I appreciate the hard work of all the people getting things ready for the opening of school. Transportation, all 160 buses were inspected and underwent maintenance and service. We did experience some late buses on the first day, as we typically do. However, we sent, as I mentioned in the last work session, we sent 3 to 4 extra folks over to help with the volume of calls, return every single phone call. I'm really proud of our transportation team and our drivers. All of this work prepared us for welcoming 12,641 students on September 4th, the first day of school. The enrollment has grown a little bit every day. Last Monday was day 5 of the 10-day head count process, and we were at 12,754. Our projection was 12,730, which we've exceeded that number by 24 students. So here's a couple of fun facts about the first day. We served approximately 123,472 ounces of milk, which equates to 965 gallons of milk, or 12 bathtubs, as long as the bathtub is 80 gallons. It's important information for me to share. Also, we served approximately 9,460 chicken nuggets. But one of the stats I look forward to presenting each year is we welcomed 892 of our students as members of the class of 2031, and that's this year's kindergarten class. This increased by 58 students from last school year. We've worked through some of the usual challenges, but overall we had a really successful first week of school, and this concludes my opening of school report. I'll take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Doctor. Go ahead.
Wonderful, safe beginning. And 2 questions I don't expect answers tonight. We know that we have 2 elementary schools that are pretty full. and that's why we're looking at a new school eventually. Just sometime later to look at how those two schools are doing. And I knew last year, principals felt they were okay
Right.
with being able to provide education in those situations. The other one is kind of funny. I've had a number of community members to ask, so when are we making up school? What predictions or what plans do you have as we go into winter weather and snow comes?
Right.
So,
So I can answer
Okay.
answer both of them. The first question related to the capacity of our schools. Dr. James is going to work through the FMP process, the Facilities Master Plan. We'll be presenting that information in October, November. We'll be presenting that information to you in November. And we have seen some spikes in some of our schools. We'll be able to make sure we accurately share that information with you in November. And the second question was,
parents are already asking, so what days are you going to take back now to make up for it, just in case that we have real bad snow?
so at this point, we've received guidance from the state superintendent, and we could do three things. One is to use time that we already have built into the calendar. One is add, and Carl, you're going to have to help me. One is add minutes to the days, or add days to the calendar.
Right.
So those are the three options that we're always, that's what we always deal with as we work through storms. The other thing that is important to note that I've had discussions with all the superintendents in the region, that's both here on the peninsula and the south side. We've had discussions about a waiver opportunity because again, when you have a mandatory evacuation, as I shared with many of you, when Zone A was mandatory evacuated, we had over 156 teachers that live in Zone A, as well as Seaford Elementary's in Zone A. So that's really difficult and challenging when you're trying to run the school day. So we don't have those answers this evening, but as we work through this, and I'm working with my fellow superintendents, we'll try to communicate that information as soon as we can.
Thank you.
If you added minutes to the day, would that be on the half days, or would you take back half days and make them full days, or how would that?
It really just depends. We've done that before. We've taken back half days. We've certain days that we have in the calendar built in that we have to that give us the option of swapping out a full instructional day for. So it really just depends.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor, for sharing that information, and we're looking forward to a great school year, and I hope that the weather cooperates, and it looks like we're going to have a long graduation day here in the future for kindergarten class. Looking forward to that. So next is our strategic plan update, and Goal 1 objectives is next on our agenda, and it's an update on our strategic plan. So Dr. Shandor, would you please share that?
Absolutely. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Guy, Dr. Vladu, and Ms. Skinner. They're going to talk about state and federal targets. I'll turn it over to Dr. Guy.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Richardson, members of the board. Tonight, we will provide the strategic plan status update to the first two objectives listed under Goal 1 of the FY 18-22 strategic plan. I'll provide an update on the changes to state accreditation and federal accountability, along with a broad overview of the division's success with respect to accreditation and federal targets. Then I'll turn it over to Ms. Skinner and Dr. Vladu to address our performance at the elementary and secondary levels. In addition to the data, they'll identify specific actions taken to which we attribute our successes and next steps for identified areas of growth. Goal 1 of York County School Division Strategic Plan states that York County students will consistently demonstrate growth and excellence in the skills and knowledge needed to be productive citizens. Under Goal 1 of the strategic plan, there are two objectives we will address this evening. You'll see each of these objectives individually as we move through the presentation. The first objective speaks to our performance on the standards of learning assessments. As has been shared in previous years, the way in which test results are calculated and data is utilized is different for state accreditation than it is for federal accountability purposes. With that being said, I'd like to walk you through some of the more significant changes. Prior to this year, the standards of accreditation included performance on SOL tests and graduation completion. The new standards look at both of these, but also include chronic absenteeism, dropout rates, and college, career, and civic readiness. However, the college, career, and civic readiness component will not be utilized until FY 22. In the past, accreditation looked at the performance of all students on the SOLs in English, reading and writing combined, math, science, and social studies. The new standards have eliminated social studies as a measure for determining accreditation. In the past, subgroup performance in English and math was reported but not included as a component of accreditation. Now, subgroups are a measure of accreditation in English and math, and the targets are the same for subgroups as they are for all students. However, there are no collective gap groups as there were in the past for federal accountability. You might remember gap group 1 in the past included students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged, and English learners as one collective group. Previously, accreditation standards looked only at pass rates. The new standards recognize growth as an important measure, and it includes students who failed the SOL but demonstrated growth from the previous year. Additionally, it includes English learners who failed but demonstrated growth in English proficiency. So how does the state calculate growth? This slide shows the growth table for reading. If a student in grades 4 through 8 fails the reading SOL test but moves at least one level up from the previous year, that student has demonstrated growth. For example, let's look at the two blue boxes on the screen. If a 7th grader failed the reading SOL test with a score of 350, but last year as a 6th grader, he or she failed with a score of 300, that student has moved from below basic high to basic low and has therefore demonstrated growth. There's a similar growth table provided for math, but I'd like to take you through an example now. Here we have two examples. On the left, we have 10 students who took the English SOL. This could be elementary or middle school. In this example, 6 students passed the SOL. They're depicted in blue. 2 of the students who failed demonstrated growth from the previous year based on the growth chart that I just shared. Those students, are depicted in orange. And finally, 1 student who failed demonstrated progress in English proficiency on the access test. That student is purple. So add these together. 6 plus 2 plus 1 equals 9, and divide by total test takers for a proficiency and growth rate of 90%. It's important to note that at the elementary and middle school level, both growth and progress for English learners is factored into the proficiency and growth rate. In our second example at the high school level, you'll notice that we again have 10 students. 6 passed and 3 in purple English learners showed progress. Add the two together, 6 plus 3, and divide by the total test takers of 10. And again, you have a proficiency and growth rate of 90%. You'll notice that there is no growth measure at the high school level, only English learner progress. That's because there's no English SOL assessment in grades 9 and 10, so no growth. It's also important to note that the math SOLs include growth only, no English learner progress, obviously, for a math test, and growth is factored at the elementary and middle school levels only, so high school doesn't have any growth factor for math. So back to our comparison of old versus new standards. In the past, the 3-year average was utilized only if a school missed the target pass rate in the current year. For example, let's say a school's pass rate for English was 73%, missing the target of 75%. However, their 3-year average was 76%. The state would use the 3-year average. With the new standards, the state uses whichever is higher of the two. So an example for York County School Division. The pass rate for Waller Mill Elementary School for the current year in reading is 96%, well above the target of 75%. However, because their 3-year average is 97%, 1 percentage point higher, that's what you'll see on the accreditation report. Lastly, the way in which the state considers small n has also changed. Previously, if a school had less than 30 students and missed the target pass rate in the current year, it was excluded from the accreditation calculation. Now, if a school has less than 30 students in the current year and misses the target, the state will utilize the 3-year average, if 30 or more, regardless of whether or not they met the target with the 3-year average. So schools previously protected by small n will now be captured by the 3-year average. And that becomes important because we're looking at subgroups now where you are more likely to have small n's. So how does the state determine accreditation? If all school quality indicators are level 1 or 2, a school is accredited. If a school has any one of these indicators at a level 3, the school is accredited with conditions. With that being said, once again, we anticipate that all 19 schools will be fully accredited for FY19. We're proud of this accomplishment and would like to recognize our hardworking students, dedicated teachers and administrators, and supportive York County families. It's because of the collective efforts of these groups that we continue to achieve at such high levels year after year. So, how is federal accountability different from state accreditation? Federal accountability includes participation rates for reading and mathematics. Accreditation does not, and participation rates have to be 95%. For federal accountability, the target pass rates vary by subgroup and increase each year, whereas with state accreditation, they're the same for all students as they are for subgroups, and they're stable or static. It's 70% for math and science, and it's 75% for English. For federal accountability, they are pass rates only. They exclude the growth and English learner progress that state accreditation includes. Participation and pass rates for high school are calculated by cohort for federal accountability. This is new, that's why you'll see a star there. This is going to become important as we talk about some of our data as we move along. So in the past, where you looked at all high school students to get the federal pass rates, now they're just looking at the graduating cohort. So when you look at the federal information, you are only looking at the information for the class of 2018 that just graduated. Federal accreditation looks at all students. Not federal, excuse me, state accreditation. The federal accountability now includes chronic absenteeism, like you have for state accreditation, but where state accreditation just looks at it for all students, federal accountability looks at it for all students and for subgroups. And this is the only place where the targets are really more rigorous than they are for state accreditation. And I'll share more about that in just a minute.
What is the percentage of absenteeism before it's considered chronic?
You are considered chronically absent if you are absent for 10% or more of the portion of the year that you are in a particular school, whether it's excused or unexcused. Federal graduation indicator hasn't changed. That is a measure that looks at standard and advanced studies diplomas only, and it is a 4-year rate. And lastly, federal accountability also looks at English learner progress, but it's a separate measure. They don't look at it as a component of the pass rate. Lastly, you may be wondering how federal accountability results are utilized. These indicators are used to identify schools for support and improvement. So how did we do? At first glance, this slide looks a little intimidating. However, with closer examination, you'll notice that all but one of the targets missed were for chronic absenteeism or participation rates. Chronic absenteeism is a new measure, and until this summer, we did not have all the details as to how this would be calculated. As I just shared a moment ago, a student is considered chronically absent if he or she misses 10% or more of the school year, whether excused or unexcused. State accreditation looks at all students as a collective group, and a level 1 rating requires that the school have no more than 15% of the student population identified as chronically absent. Federal accountability standards look at all students and subgroups. Additionally, the criteria for meeting the standard is more rigorous than it is for state accreditation. Federal standards identify students as missing the target if more than 9% of all students are chronically absent. And the targets for the subgroups range between 5% for Asian students and 14% for students with disabilities. We are working with IT, and they've developed a program to calculate chronic absenteeism for all students and are working to provide the same data for subgroups as well. Additionally, this information has been shared with school administration, and they will provide additional support to our schools in this area. With that being said, based on the criteria established in Virginia's ESSA plan, we do not anticipate that any YCSD schools will be identified for targeted support and improvement. With respect to participation rates, you'll notice that this is just an issue for the high schools, and I want to remind you that the high school calculation is based on a cohort model. So again, they're only looking at the graduating class of 2018, not all the students in the high school, so a smaller number. It's also important to note that high school students transferring in from out of state who already completed Algebra 1 are counted as non-participants, even if they took Geometry or Algebra 2 SOL in the York County School Division. In an initial review of our data, it appears that this is the primary reason our high schools miss the participation rate, because we have so many military students in our school division that we have students transfer in. They took Algebra 1 as a 9th grader in another state, and so the federal does not count anybody for Geometry or Algebra 2, and the state is currently seeking a waiver to that exclusion. They do it for our middle school students who take Algebra 1 in middle school, but they don't do it for students that transfer in from out of state. The next few slides speak to the performance of our subgroups at the division level. These charts are based on federal calculations, so they are pass rates and do not include growth measures. In this graph, our pass rates for 2014 are gray, 2015 are light blue, 2016 are green, and 2017 are dark blue, and pass rates for 2018 are maroon. The federal targets are white with a black outline. You'll see this color scheme repeated throughout the presentation. So how did we do in reading? The division met or exceeded all federal targets. As you can see, over a 5-year period, the division has demonstrated growth in every subgroup, and although we saw small dips in some subgroups from the previous year, all are less than 1 percentage point, with the exception of Black students, which dropped by 1.5 percentage points, and English learners, which dropped by 3.3 percentage points. It is important to note that we are ranked second in our region in both of these subgroups. Our most notable gain in reading was with students with disabilities, where we've seen growth every year since 2014, improving by more than 17 percentage points and ranked first in our region. I want to remind you all that the state does not rank divisions. The York County School Division uses the information provided by the Virginia Department of Education to compare our performance across the state, and that information can be found on the VDOE website, but we're actually doing the sorting ourselves. In math, the division once again met or exceeded all federal targets this year. Although we were once again ranked third in the state for all students, we saw small declines in each subgroup. These declines were less than 2 percentage points for all but 2 subgroups, Black and Hispanic students. Performance for Black students declined by 3.4 percentage points and Hispanic students by 2.4. However, our pass rates for these 2 subgroups are in the top tier at the state level, tied at 7th highest in the state for both groups. Lastly, this graph shows our performance on the federal graduation indicator. And once again, the division exceeded all federal graduation targets. However, as we look at our prior performance, additional work will need to occur at the subgroup level. It's important to remember that FGI is a 4-year cohort and includes only standard and advanced studies diplomas. As such, students with disabilities and English learners that may stay in school until age 22 and may need more time to graduate are not represented in this data. Additionally, FGI lags by 1 year, so this data is for the class of 2017. The graduation performance of the class of 2018 is better explained by the state accreditation model, which Dr. Vladu will share later in the presentation. This concludes my portion of the presentation. Before I turn this over to Ms. Skinner, do you have any questions?
Question. 10% or more of the school year for chronic absenteeism. So I can get my mind around that. Tell me, how many days are we looking at?
So if a student enrolled on the first day of school, and we have 180 days of school,
Okay.
that would mean you'd have to miss 18 days. However, a student who transfers into my school later in the year.
Semester.
Well, if they come to my school and they're there for less than 50% of the year, I don't count them. But if it's 50% or more, so let's say they come in at the semester, and that's 90 days. We've got 90 days left in the school year. If they miss 9 days, then they're chronically absent.
And has that been by definition has that always been?
No, chronic absenteeism is new for state accreditation and federal accountability
So
purposes.
never really had a percentage.
So we've not
attached to
had that before. And one of the things that we've recognized and that we're going to work to address is that in some cases it may be clerical corrections that need to be made. For example, let's say that Dr. George, you were tardy to school, but you came to school and somebody didn't go back in and change you from absent to tardy, then that counts as one of your days all total. So if you were chronically tardy to school and we weren't doing a good job changing you from being absent, marked absent originally to tardy, then you're going to be one of our chronically absent students. So we'll be working with our clerical staff as well to make sure that we are have measures in place and we're accurately reporting that. And as I said, we didn't have all the information from the state in terms of how it was going to be calculated. They do exclude students that are homebound. So if you go homebound because of illness, you're excluded. And a student who may be suspended is excluded from the calculation just for the days that they were suspended.
Are tardies accumulated to count as absences?
Not for chronic absenteeism.
As a district, at each level, elementary, middle, and high school, what's the absentee rates for last year?
I don't have that data. I could share with you if we go back and look at the chronic absenteeism pieces, we could provide that information.
I can look at it.
Yeah, but I don't have it for this evening.
Couple of questions. You said this slide was 2017.
Yes, the FGI has always lagged by 1 year.
Okay.
Now the plan is for next year that it will actually be the current year, but every year whenever we've reported on FGI, it's always been a year behind.
The slides, 2 previous slides, reading and math.
That's current year data.
That's current year data. Okay.
It's just FGI is the only one that lags.
That must have been your second slide, and you talked about the gaps in English and math, about 9% passing.
The participation
Participation
rates?
I'll have to go back to that. But
I
it was
can
one
go
of the
back.
one of the first slides that talked about English and math.
Mm-hmm.
You gave an example of a 9% student pass rate versus, so my question was, if that 9% is truly York County, or if that was an example of,
Oh, no, the 2 where I showed the students in the different colors, that was just an example. That was provided by that was actually
Provided by
a
the
Virginia
state.
Department of Ed document that was provided.
so with the data that we have, and we know what the state and the federal government is going to request, especially the state in the future, are we looking to see with the statistics that we have where we fall in line with the new criteria?
Absolutely, and one of the things that you'll see when Ms. Skinner and Dr. Vlad do their presentation, one of the things that we did for the board is we actually, in many cases, you'll see, rather than just this year's scores, you'll see 2 columns for FY18. One is gray and one is a light blue color. And the reason we did that is because for the grade levels in the areas where it's a proficiency and growth rate, we wanted you to be able to compare. So we've done a York County calculation that's a straight pass rate, so you can compare to previous years' data. But yes, we have that information. The state actually provides fairly extensive reports that give us all the data in terms of what current year pass rates are and what 3-year averages are. What you'll see in these reports, though, is what you'll see for state accreditation purposes. So in many cases, you're going to see asterisks that are 3-year averages because that's what the state is reporting. And we contemplated, should we give you both, but it became so confusing to look at 10 elementary schools across the top and all the subgroups, and then give you 2 scores for every single subgroup. Ultimately, we have that information available if the board wanted that information to look at the current year in the cases where the 3-year average has been used. Did I answer your question?
I think so. I'll look to see where you want to, where we go from now with suggestions for improvements.
And that was gonna be my question. Has the state or the BDOE even started putting any of that information out about suggestions on how to address chronic absenteeism, or the region starting to get together to discuss that?
Some of that information has been provided. I think a big part of it is that as we have that information, being attentive to those students and being aware of it, providing principals with the resources that they can pull that data on an ongoing basis so that they can identify a student before they become chronically absent. And so that's really what IT has, and they've already done the all students. It wasn't until the summer that we even got the targets for federal accountability. And so as soon as we shared that with our IT department, they said we can make that, we can create that for you as well. And in our September principals meeting, one of the things that we're going to share with them is all this information with regard to chronic absenteeism and what resources we're creating for them that they'll have available so that they can monitor these students in the process. And it may also cause folks to have conversations with families about a student who might need to go homebound for a short period of time because they're out with the flu or mono or something that puts them out for 2 weeks. Because if you're out for 2 weeks, that's you're halfway there.
And that's a lot to keep up with, so thank you.
It is.
Just one more quick question. So going back to the math performance, so we've seen a dip across the board, particularly with Black students
And Hispanic.
and Hispanic.
Mhm.
Is there a correlation or analysis being done to see if there's correlation between the performance, chronic absenteeism, and maybe even suspension rates?
We are hopeful. One of the things that we are working to address or provide in the division is we don't have a data dashboard that does the calculations for us. It's the people in this room that are doing those calculations. We're working with our IT department to create some of those dashboards so that we can draw comparisons between when we're looking at performance. Can we make a connection or comparison to absenteeism? Can we make a comparison to discipline? And so, in fact, we just had that conversation again this morning that hopefully by the
October 5th.
the first interim period that we've really been able to, not that IT will have it created for us, but that we have prioritized the things that we want to have created, because there is, in all likelihood, a correlation there, but we don't have the ability to do it right now without individuals doing a lot of pivot tables.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yes.
So y'all don't have SPSS or anything like that?
Yeah. We have our IT department, which is really wonderful when we ask for them to create the databases for us. But it is a person who that is not their primary job to create the databases for us, but they have always been very accommodating whenever we've shared with them something that we need.
Well, I would think as we get more and more data, that we should, in the future, look at investing in something robust like SPSS or some program like that where it's not so
Labor intensive.
labor intensive.
Because it is right now.
Because you can manipulate it and make it run any report you want, see any trends, any analysis, any comparisons or correlations that you need. So
Absolutely.
And I think that's important, and I was waiting for the rest of the presentation to see where we go from here. Because when you have slippage, the concern is, okay, how you gonna fix it? And if we aren't able to crunch the numbers the way we're supposed to, then we don't know how to fix it. Or we can't fix it yet because we don't know truly what the problem is, other than numbers. So that's usually where I am is, okay, we've identified a problem. How are we gonna truly fix the problem now? And if we can't fix it, then we're gonna have that same problem. If we don't understand it.
Yeah.
well, kudos to your staff for mastering pivot tables. Anybody that can do that deserves a golden apple. I mean, that's,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Ms. Skinner is up next.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide you with an update on the performance of our elementary schools this evening. As Dr. Guy shared earlier, we expect all York County elementary schools to be fully accredited again this year. This slide illustrates some of the accomplishments that we have achieved, and on this chart you will notice two columns that list 2018 results. The column shaded in gray is our own calculated data that allows for a straight comparison to the previous year's data, so in other words, like apples to apples comparison. The blue column indicates proficiency and growth data, which, as Dr. Guy shared, is how the state calculates English and math accreditation at the elementary school level. The shaded box on the right does indicate what is included in that proficiency and growth calculation. It's also important to note that anywhere that you see an asterisk, that includes a 3-year average rather than a result for FY18. As you can see in this chart, many schools continue to show progress in both English and math last year. I'm excited to share that 5 of our schools continue to show improvements in English, and 6 of our schools continue to show growth in math. And additionally, 8 of our 10 schools had scores in the 90s in both English and math this past year. And as you may already know, the scores you see for English and math include an average for grades 3 through 5. So within this data, I'd like to share a few of our successes at the 4th grade level. In grade 4, the division pass rate in English increased by 4 percentage points, with Magruder Elementary School showing a 14 percentage point gain. In grade 4 math, the division maintained a 92% pass rate, with Magruder showing a 12 percentage point gain. We also like to know how we compare regionally and statewide. We continue to be ranked in the top 3 divisions for our region in grades 3, 4, and 5 math. In English, we are ranked 1st in our regions in grade 4 and 5, and 2nd in grade 3 reading. In grade 4, we are ranked 1st in the state of Virginia. Yay! That's right.
Yes.
These results show some
strong
areas.
class.
These results also show some areas where we still need to continue to work. As you can see, some of our schools did have declines in specific subject areas, and in my presentation in a few moments, I will share some of our next steps of what we're doing to support our student performance at the elementary school level. This chart provides accreditation results for science and social science. Science is included in the state accreditation results, and as such, you'll see a blue column there for that. Social science is not included in the state accreditation, as Dr. Guy shared earlier, so the results you see listed in the gray are our own calculated averages. In this data, you can see that Dare Elementary School had double-digit gains in science, and Magruder and Yorktown both had double-digit gains in social science. The information on this slide shows how each elementary school performed on our school quality indicators, which are used to determine our accreditation status. If a school has a level 1 or 2 in these indicators, the school is fully accredited. I am pleased to share that 8 of our 10 elementary schools achieved a level 1 status for all school quality indicators. 2 schools received level 2 ratings, as you can see here, Dare for achievement gaps in English, and Magruder for achievement gaps in English and math. This slide provides specific subgroup performance outcomes at each elementary school, which indicates how the levels were determined on that previous slide that I just shared. As you can see, the areas that are marked in red, those indicate a pass rate of 65% or lower. In the previous slide, Dare and Magruder were both determined to be level 2 schools for achievement gaps in English, because student performance for one group one group, students with disabilities was a level 3. Magruder is also identified as a level 2 school for achievement gaps in math for that same reason. You'll notice that Yorktown's students with disabilities are a level 2. Since the school received a single level 2 subgroup indicator, the school's overall accreditation status is determined to be a level 1. So this previous slide showed that all of our elementary schools met 14 of our 16 subgroup performance area indicators. We believe that that success comes from the ongoing implementation of our professional learning communities, and I shared a little bit about those last year with the board. Up until now, many of our PLC teams have been administrator-led. We are excited to share that our division did provide additional training on leading PLCs to a large group of teacher leaders this summer. These 126 teachers will now work alongside their school administrators to help us lead our professional learning communities in our schools. And while we have made some continuous improvements with our students with disability subgroup population, it is important that our team continues to support our level 2 schools in this area. Each school has completed an initial analysis of their student outcomes and developed some suggested next steps. Dr. Gould and I will work closely with those 3 schools to monitor student performance and the implementation of student interventions. Our teachers and staff have also worked to grow in the area of math instruction this past year. As I mentioned last year, the VDOE approved new math standards that will be taught and assessed this school year. During the school year, we worked to provide and to support the changes so that we can develop a strong foundation in our students, and then we're going to continue to build on that this year. Some of the things that we've done, first of all, we had our teacher leaders this summer help us draft curriculum guides to support our new standards in math. We brought together 25 teacher leaders to draft a new K-12 math model. The division created K-5 math leads at every school who will now serve as resident experts at the elementary school level. In addition, we have created the first math coach position who will help support K-12 math instruction. This summer, the division purchased a large number of math manipulatives that will provide our students with some concrete representation of our math concepts. And if you look at the picture there on the right, that's actually from the first week of school. And so our students were already using those to help build their math concepts. What's exciting about this is that we now will have that consistency throughout the school division for their use. The division will also continue to provide professional development on a variety of math topics to include the new process goals, number talks, and how to use our new math manipulatives. And lastly, we have developed a math walkthrough tool for our administrators and teacher leaders to use to help us identify where we need to continue professional development in the area of math instruction. So this time I'd like to now share with you about our next goal, which is our 3rd grade reading for our students. So this chart shows the division's growth from FY14 to FY18 in grade 3 reading. And before I share a lot of information on this slide, I think it's important to provide an historical picture of grade 3 reading over the past 5 years. The division average for grade 3 reading in FY14 was 75%, and the state's average at that time was 69%. During the next 4 years, YCSD's average increased to 90%, outpacing the state's average of 75%. This year, our goal was to maintain upon and improve on last year's performance. Unfortunately, our grade 3 performance did decrease to 85%. Similarly, the state's average decreased to 72% in FY18. It is important to note that we are currently ranked 5th in the state for grade 3 reading. While we did not meet our goal of 90% this year as a division, I am excited to highlight that Grafton Bethel, Mount Vernon, Seaford, and Tabb Elementary Schools had student pass rates at 90% and above, and both Grafton Bethel and Mount Vernon showed continuous improvements from last year. While we're pleased with this progress of our schools, that our schools made this year, we know that there's still a lot of work that we need to do as we plan for the school year ahead, and we want to make sure we prepare those students who may not have passed the SOL test so that they are successful in the coming year. This slide provides cohort data for our elementary students who completed grade 5 this past June. And the green bars on the chart show our grade 3 reading scores from FY16, and our average performance that year was 88%. The blue bar shows that same cohort growth in FY17 for when they were in grade 4, and our average at that year was 88% as well in grade 3 reading. So finally, if you would, take a look at the maroon bar. That bar indicates the student performance in grade 5 reading this past year. And our division average was 90%, which was a 2 percentage point increase from when those students began in grade 3. I'd also like to highlight both Yorktown and Mount Vernon elementary schools who showed double-digit gains and growth for those cohort students over the last 2 years. So now I'd like to share a few of our successes and our planned next steps in the area of English performance. As you may recall, last year I shared with you that we were training all of our kindergarten and first grade students on the topic of concept of word, and we made that decision based on the research that shows that students who struggle in grade 3 reading often lack a firm concept of word when they were in kindergarten. So this chart that you see here is information that shows how our spring COW, we call concept of word COW, so you'll hear it referred to as COW data, from our kindergarten students in FY17 and then FY18. The FY18 data that you see there shows the training that we conducted this school year. And the division's goal is by FY22 that all of our students in kindergarten will be at a 90% firm rate. And this year you can see we were at 89%, so we definitely feel like we're on our way to meeting the goal in the coming year. So building on our successes in K2 from last year, we do plan to continue our word study training in grades 3 through 5 in the coming year. We're also excited to share that Dr. Gould's department trained 14 staff members this summer on structured literacy. And we have an additional 28 teachers who will receive this training this year. This will include at least one special education teacher and one reading specialist from every elementary and middle school. The training is designed to complement the work of our level literacy intervention, and this particular training works for students who have issues with decoding words. Where the level literacy intervention really supports comprehension. Last year, we created a literacy coach position from an existing reading specialist position, and that person worked one-on-one with our teachers and our staff. She co-planned, she modeled, she supported literacy instruction within the classroom. That support was highly successful, and we plan to continue that again this year with that position. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. Before I turn this over to Dr. Baidu, I'd like to know if you have any questions for me. Yes, sir.
Yes. There's a lot of great success in there. I don't want to be the cosmic killjoy, but I'm just wondering, am I reading this correctly? Grade 3 reading, with the exception of Grafton, Bethel, and Mount Vernon, everything went down. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So we did have, we had declines in all of our schools except 2. That is correct, which aligns with the state performance as well.
I'm just wondering. I always want to know why. You know what. And I guess that's something we can get reports on later as we determine that. I just, grade 3 of all grades, with reading, it concerns me.
We remember the time that we were real concerned about having that the third grade levels, at least 90% reading on third grade level. And we had that, and then when the state changed something, we asked I remember one year asked, where were we with that? And the answer was, well, the state has changed the tool.
And that's why we put it back into the strategic
Yes.
plan, because we wanted to be at that 90%.
So is that what changed, that the state caused a dip? To change the test or whatever, those changes?
So the state just provided us last week with a summary report that kind of shows our areas within reading, fiction, nonfiction, and they break that out for us. So we just received that information last week from the state.
Okay.
We are in the process of breaking that apart by school and as a division to look to see what were those reasons and what can we do to provide support to our teachers in that area. We also do a thorough analysis at the end of the school year when our principals come, our administrative teams come and provide an update on their school improvement plan. And they talk about what worked and what didn't work. And so they do a thorough analysis, and now me and my team will work with them this year to make sure that we're providing that additional support.
One question, switch over to fourth grade, if we're looking at reading and math, I think we're up 14 for reading and up 13 for math for Magruder, which is incredible. Once again, I'm curious, what if you had to put your finger on something, what do you think's going on there? It's
Well,
wonderful news.
it is
It's
wonderful
fantastic.
news. It is. Thank you, Mr. Kirk.
I'll answer the tough questions.
Did provide an analysis for us. He and his team are very excited. They've done quite a bit to build relationships within that team.
And goal setting.
In goal
A lot of
setting,
goal
yes.
setting with
They've
those
done a lot
kids.
of goal setting. A lot of small group instruction took place within fourth grade there, and he is currently working to replicate those things in his other grade levels as well. So we have one of the members in that team who's actually going to be, he joined us this summer as one of our teacher leaders. So I think we've got a lot we can replicate in regards to what they've done.
And not just other grade levels, but other schools too.
Absolutely.
Any of these grade-
Yes.
That's phenomenal.
Yes.
It really is.
Yes.
It's great.
And I think the thing that Candy didn't mention is our grade 4 reading scores went up, whereas if you looked at the state performance declined. So we saw growth, significant growth at the division level in grade 4 when the
Yeah.
state declined in that same grade level.
So for a point of clarification, and now it's not gonna let me go back. Magruder made fantastic strides, wonderful. Then when we looked at the reading growth, grade 3 to grade 5, Magruder took a dip, did it not?
Magruder, no, if you look at Magruder they're flat.
Flat.
Yeah, but from grade 3 to grade 5, they actually showed improvement. It's between grade 4 and grade 5 that they're flat.
Remain stable.
I've gotta go back and look because it was Magruder, Yorktown, and one area was Dare Elementary. And I guess I go back to my question about Magruder and Yorktown in certain areas. Size of the school, some of the questions that Michael asked regarding data. Just overall, is the size of the school a problem with some of the areas? So that's all. Look at it
Both of those-
globally.
If I can share, both of those school enrollments are down. So Yorktown Elementary and
Magruder.
Magruder are both down.
Down.
Tab Elementary is probably our largest
Yes,
elementary
they
school.
are.
Okay.
And Dare is a
Okay.
very small school, and I
Okay.
think what you're referring to is students with disabilities, because those are the 3 schools that,
For
that-
level 2.
Magruder had a level 3 for students with disabilities in reading and math,
Yes.
and Dare had a level 3 for reading. Yorktown Elementary had R10 for reading, which means that they decreased the failure rate by 10%. So that's really good for Yorktown Elementary School. And in math, they were a level 2, not a level 3. So
Okay, thanks.
I guess one of my questions is, level 3, that's over 4 years. How did it get to that point?
no, a level 3. That was it's for the current year.
Yeah, but it's.
Another way you can get a level 3 is for 4 years as a level 2, but that's not why they got a level 3.
What was it?
It was for the current year. Their current year, they didn't
Yeah, but if you look at the description of a level 3,
mhm.
okay, it's over 4 years, 65% or lower, right?
That's one of the criteria. That's one criteria. If you're a level,
That was the only one that was on, that's all I have to go by, that was the only one
no,
that was.
here, I'll go back to it for you. Sorry. All right, so, not on that one. But if you, it says 65% or lower or level 2 for more than 4 consecutive years. So that's how you make a level 3. And so if you're below 65%, you're level 3.
For 4 consecutive years.
No, or.
You gotta
It's
read
an
the first-
or.
First sentence.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yes.
All right.
Either or.
So a school that is at a level 2 for 4 years in a row, like I might be at, so level 2 is between 66 and 74%. And so maybe your school is at 70, that's for English, and for math, it's 66 to
I got it,
69.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
I'm sorry, there's just so many new pieces
Well, it's
now. It is,
complicated.
it is really.
It's pretty complicated.
I don't want
It
your
is.
job.
So how long has concept of work been in place?
Well, we've, the PAL's office at the University of Virginia has always provided us with information on concept of word, but there's been a lot more information that has come out in the last few years, a lot more research at the state level. And so we felt like, I guess was what, 2 years ago,
Yeah.
we really started having conversations about it. We did some very intentional training last year. And if you remember 2 years ago, I was here and I shared about the work that Magruder had and the success that almost 100% of their students.
Yeah, they had a high school.
Yes, and so we had the University of Virginia come in and work with that team. And so we built upon that success, just like you had, I'd shared with you a few minutes ago. It's important for us to see where we had those successes. And so we saw what happened with those students, and so we implemented that into all of our training this year with our kindergarten and our first grade teachers.
So really, you've only been using it here for a year. So there's no way to make a correlation between the dip in 3rd grade reading and the concept of word in kindergarten. That's where I was going.
Not yet.
Not yet.
We are really excited about the potential down the road with
we
regard to 3rd grade reading.
We have collected information on concept of word, but the intentional training that we've done in the last 2 years is much more detailed than we've done in the
So
past.
you have 4 schools, the concept of word, that are 0 or single-digit performers. You got 0, 2, 3, and 9%. I don't know what the schools are. So what's the plan?
But one of the schools that
I
showed
would pull the numbers
little
up again.
growth also showed tremendous growth from the previous year. So as you look at Magruder at 0, Magruder started the training a year before. And so Magruder's score, actually, if you look at where Magruder is in FY17, they're the highest one in the school division. And so they held steady this year. So whereas the growth, we're really excited, and I shouldn't be jumping
No, that's
in,
okay.
Candy should be sharing, but this is information that to me is really exciting. So when you look at Magruder's 0 growth, recognize that they got the training the year before. And so their kindergarten teachers had already seen a huge jump from FY16 to FY17 kindergarten group.
What was that?
Do you have the information for where they were from FY16? It was pretty significant.
It was, I don't have that with me,
I think-
Cindy, but I can certainly
Yeah.
provide it, but
I think they were probably toward the bottom of the performers for the 10 elementary schools, and for Magruder to be the top performer in FY17 is something for Magruder to be extremely proud of, and it really was based on the work that we did. So I would look at where they were in FY17 with FY18. Obviously Yorktown Elementary School had a lot of room for growth. So,
Thank you for all that information. We're going to move on to
Great.
Tony.
okay, I'm gonna get us back up to, there we go.
Well, good evening. At this time, I'm pleased to have the opportunity to present the work of our secondary schools. So as Dr. Guy shared earlier, based on preliminary data, all of our middle schools are fully accredited. The gray columns on this chart show passing rates and may be used to compare this year's performance with past year's performance. As a reminder, the blue column represents state accreditation ratings. Also, any data marked by an asterisk represents a 3-year average. So as it relates to English performance, 3 of our 4 middle schools increased their passing rates over the previous year, and all of our middle schools made progress or maintained their performance when compared with last year's accreditation metrics. Notably, Grafton and Tabb middle schools have accreditation ratings of 90% or higher in English, math, and science. At the secondary level, English accreditation ratings are a combination of reading and writing scores. I also want to share some additional rankings that are not seen in this chart. As it relates to grade level performance, York County School Division ranks first in the region in grade 7 reading. Also, our division ranks first in the region for writing aid performance. Overall, mathematics performance shows slight variations and follows similar trends seen across the region and the state. However, when progress and growth are taken into account, we maintain our high level of performance. Later in this presentation, I will discuss our next steps relating to both English and mathematics instruction. The information on this slide shows how each middle school performed on the school quality indicators used to determine accreditation status. As Ms. Skinner previously stated, if a school has all level 1 or 2 in its indicators, the school is fully accredited. Tonight, I'm pleased to share that 3 of our 4 middle schools achieved a level 1 status for all school quality indicators. Queens Lake Middle School received a level 2 rating in achievement gaps in English, which I will address on the next slide. So now I would like to review our subgroup performance. In reading, our middle schools earned level 1 indicators in 30 of 32 targets. Among these, Grafton Middle and Yorktown Middle reduced their failure rates by 10% or more for students with disabilities. Though this slide does not provide the division data, some notable increases in reading are as follows. As you may remember, last year I stood in front of you and reported that all of our middle schools missed the target for students with disabilities in reading. Tonight I'm proud to report that 3 middle schools met all targets. Now to some reading performance highlights. Reading performance for students with disabilities at the division level increased by 6 percentage points over the previous year. This is the highest performance level for our students since 2012. Likewise, reading performance for economically disadvantaged students increased by 2 percentage points, and for our Black students, we increased by 4 percentage points over the previous year. Both of these subgroups are also at the highest performance level since 2012. These levels of performance are important because while the state and the region saw declines in these areas, our teachers and students countered the trend, and more students did well as a result of this hard work. In mathematics, while there are no notable variations in performance, 30 of 32 indicators achieved level 1 status. Later in this presentation, I will share our next steps to address mathematics instruction. Tonight, I'm also pleased to report that based on preliminary data, all of our high schools are fully accredited. As a reminder, the gray columns once again show passing rates and may be used to compare performance to past years. The blue columns represent accreditation ratings, while any data marked by asterisks denote 3-year averages. As a reminder, as Dr. Guy also stated earlier, it is important to remember that there is no growth measure at the high school level, only YEL progress. Now I would like to share a few highlights represented in this chart. In English and math, 4 out of 5 schools continue to have performance ratings that are 90% or higher. Also in science, 4 of 5 schools have performance ratings that are 90% or higher. And lastly, 4 of 5 high schools have graduation and completion indices that exceed 98%. Notably, Bruton High School increased by 4 percentage points in this area over the previous year. Now to overall high school accreditation ratings. Based on preliminary results, all high school achieved a level 1 accreditation rating in each school quality indicator. On the next slide, I'll review the performance of our subgroups. Our high schools achieved level 1 ratings in 39 of 40 targets in both English and math, respectively. And while division-wide there were no notable increases in these areas that are represented on this chart, we are proud of our schools for maintaining this high level of performance. I also want to share some notable achievements that are not directly evident in this chart. Our division ranks first in the region in English 11 writing. Also, we're first in the region in geometry, and in Algebra 2 performance, we have the same ranking. One area that will require improvement is the English performance of our students with disabilities at York High School. Later in this presentation, I will share our strategies for improving performance in this area. So at this time, I would like to take a few moments to discuss our next steps. The tier system of support implemented through the PLC process has shown to work. The schools that miss one or more targets will be provided with additional support through this process. The learning needs of every student are met when general and special educators co-plan and co-teach. The team approach provides the context to differentiate instruction and thus engage every student in on-grade level standards. To assist our schools to implement these effective practices, we have engaged in a 2-year process that will provide professional development, school-based diagnostics, feedback, and support. When done right, teaching in a 90-minute block yields results for all students. As such, this past summer, our middle school English and special education teachers received training on teaching in a 90-minute block with small group strategies. We are thus committing to the use of small group structures, and more training and support will be provided to our schools. Our reading specialists are the key to unlocking middle school literacy. This year, our principals used the master schedule process to provide reading specialists with additional time to support literacy in the classroom. In regards to math, as Ms. Skinner stated earlier, we will also implement new math standards at the secondary level during the current school year. Additionally, the development and implementation of the K-12 math model is designed to respond to the need of students to compete in a technological workforce. When fully implemented, the K-12 math model will place students at the center of the learning mathematic processes and concepts. So on behalf of our department, many of which are here tonight with us, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present the work of our hardworking teachers, students, school staff, school leaders, as well as the continued support of our parents. At this time, we would like to open the presentation for any questions or comments you might have.
Just one quick question. Define region again. How many divisions are in the region that we're doing?
The region is all of the south side and the peninsula. Gloucester is not included in our region.
Pocosin included?
Pocosin's included in our region.
So, and all of the south side?
We're region
All
2.
of the south side.
Yes, the whole side.
And it also includes Northampton on the eastern shore.
I think it's
and Merrimack.
15 school divisions in the region.
Suffolk's included, Isle of Wight,
15?
Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Norfolk, Portsmouth.
Okay, great.
and Newport.
Williamsburg, James City County.
That's tremendous. Yeah.
Wonderful report. I mean, a lot of data that you all have
A
spilled,
lot of
put
information.
into this. Fantastic. As I always say, the challenge is to maintain what we have
Move
and
it up a notch.
identify the areas that we're weak in and keep going. Seems like
Thank you
students
for
with
providing the
disabilities.
presentation.
And thank you for all the hard work.
Yes,
I mean, it
yes.
makes me proud to sit here and be part of a board that has folks like you that make this thing happen. So, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to echo the board's comments. Thank the three of you and all these guys behind us. And one of our pivot tables expert here is in the back. Raise your hand real quick. So I appreciate Mr. Anderson's comment related to that. We've had several discussions about a data system. And last but not least, all of our teachers that work extremely hard to engage and reach every single child in this division. They do a wonderful job, and our parents do a wonderful job. They're active participants in their child's learning experience, and we're really fortunate to have that in the school division.
Thank you. And we're going to move on. We have a meeting upstairs at 7, so we're going to continue on. Our next agenda item this evening is the recess committee update. And I'll ask Dr. Shandor to provide information.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Board members, I'm going to ask Dr. Butler, you can slide up to the table, then we'll be ready for the next presentation. Sorry. I'm going to ask Ms. Skinner, Director of Elementary Instruction. She'll provide a brief update on the work of the recess committee. I'll turn it over to Ms. Skinner.
Good evening, Chairman Richardson, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to provide you with a brief overview on the work of the Recess Committee has done with our new recess bill. As you may already know, House Bill 1419 was signed by the governor on April 6th of this year. We're excited about the opportunity it provides to our students and our schools. Within this bill, there are 2 parts which I will briefly review for you. Part 1 states that schools must have a minimum of 680 hours of instructional time spent on core instruction. Core instruction is defined as English, science, math, and social science. Part 2 states that the new legislation, or in Part 2, the new legislation redefines the term recess as unstructured recreational time that is intended to develop teamwork, social skills, and overall physical fitness. Recess can now be included within the instructional day, but may not exceed 15% of total instructional hours. This slide provides a timeline of our work from the date when the bill was enacted. As I shared a few minutes ago, the bill was enacted and signed by the governor on April 6th. During our regularly scheduled principals meeting in May, I provided an overview of that new bill to the principals. At that time, the group discussed and made a recommendation to move forward with a committee to really look at what options were available to us as a school division. I spent much of the month of June collecting school schedule and recess data. In July, we developed a committee plan and we drafted a survey. In August, during our Leadership Academy, I provided that draft survey to the principals and asked for their feedback on that. On August 15th, I met with the Recess Committee for the first time, and I provided the survey to them as well, and I'll talk about that in just a moment, for their feedback. On August 29th, we sent that survey out to parents and teachers of our K-5 students. On September 9th, the survey closed, which was last Sunday evening. We were scheduled actually last Thursday, the 13th of September, to meet with our recess committee for the second time, but unfortunately, due to weather-related closures, we were not able to meet. I have proposed a new meeting time for this Thursday, the 20th, with the team. I really wanted to kind of move that meeting along as quickly as I could. I'm still waiting to hear back on availability. Unfortunately, people have schedules and they're not always available, and so I have not finalized that date yet. The committee was comprised of 20 members. We had 2 members from each school. That included 10 parents. We had 7 teachers and then 3 building level administrators as part of the committee. When we developed that committee, we felt it was really important that we had several criteria in place. The most important criteria, the first one, was to make sure that all members were objective about the topic, and we also wanted to make sure we had representation, parent representation from every school. We also wanted to make sure that our parents represented a diverse K-5 student body. So that meant we wanted to make sure that we had a military-connected family represented, as well as special and gifted education students, families. We also wanted to make sure that we had a variety of teachers included. So our teachers that are on the committee include general education, special education, and we also have a PE and an art teacher on the committee.
And Candy, if I can interject, we also made sure that we represented with our parents and our teachers both the primary grade levels and the 3-5 grade levels too.
So at that meeting, I shared the committee. The goal with the committee was to provide a recommendation to the division staff regarding the addition of recess within the instructional day. And to accomplish that, we would be reviewing options for adjusting recess time, and we would gather information from parents and teachers in the form of a survey. When we began that meeting with the committee members, I did request that they remain objective about the process, that they become informed, they review parent and teacher feedback, and that we work to develop consensus on recess times. This was the agenda that I shared with the committee that day and we followed. First of all, I reviewed the committee purpose that I just shared with you a few minutes ago. I provided some research to the group, and this is the document that I actually provided them each with a copy of. It's entitled Strategies for Recess in Schools, and you see it there. This document is endorsed by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. It's endorsed by the National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, Division of Population Health, and the Society of Health and Physical Education Educators. So we discussed some pieces of research in here, some recommendations of this particular document as well. We then, I provided an overview of the work to date that we've done as part of our work with the new legislation. I did provide the committee with a legislative overview of recess through the years, so they were current on that. And then I also provided an overview of our current elementary schedules and how all of that works. And then I provided the group with time to really look at the survey draft. I wanted their feedback on that. And so what I asked them to do was to independently read over the survey, both of the surveys, the parent and the teacher. And then they worked in groups to identify anything that they felt was unclear in the survey, what they felt needed to be added to the survey, and if there was anything that they felt needed to be removed from the survey. And then we shared that information out to the committee and as a group. So our next steps, during our next meeting, which I hope will be this week, we do plan to review the survey results that we've just received. We plan to do a decision analysis and to create a timeline for implementation. It is my hope that the committee will arrive at a recommendation on this data and further meetings will not be needed. Once a decision is made, I have asked principals to be prepared to move forward with the recommended changes as soon as they can, but definitely no later than by the end of Q2. And as I shared earlier, we just received that data right before we left for the weather-related incidents. And so I'm in the process of reviewing the parent and teacher survey results right now. This chart does provide some preliminary information regarding the response rate. And as a reminder, each of our families received a survey link for each parent or guardian in the family. We shared the survey with close to 10,000 individuals, and we received more than 3,000 responses for an overall response rate of 31%. So this concludes my presentation. I appreciate the opportunity to provide you with an overview. This time I'll ask if you have any questions for me.
So 680 instructional hours is what we have now. They said you can't exceed 15%, right? For recess breaks. So 102 hours is what they're.
So,
is
correct.
what you can't go over 102 hours.
I'm sorry, ask me that question again. I'm sorry.
I think I'm answering it right. 680.
What's the
You're not allowed to
percentage?
go over 15% of 680 for unstructured.
No.
How do they
No.
define it?
No,
Am I looking at this wrong?
Because the 680 is talking about core instructional time. So you have to have 680 hours of core instructional time
Right.
when you're looking at the four academic disciplines, English, math, science, history, and social science.
So,
Where the,
so it's our current instructional time for a school day is 370 minutes for a full day, and that's with recess calculated in. So if you take 15% of that, that's roughly around 50 minutes, 55 minutes within a school day.
That doesn't sound right. This is independent of the current recess time that they get, correct? That is not part of the instructional day?
yeah, currently recess is, I should say currently, previously recess could not be counted within the instructional time. But there are two different things. There is instructional time for the entire school day, and then there's core instructional time. So that's the piece that I was trying to clarify with Dr. George. Core instructional time does not include recess. It is the four academic disciplines.
So local school boards should provide a minimum of 680 hours of instructional time to students in elementary school. And then the next slide, I just want to make sure I'm understanding it. They may include, let's see, unstructured recreational time that is intended to develop teamwork. Well, any calculation, as long as this unstructured recreational time does not exceed 15% of total instructional time. Didn't we say total instructional time was 680?
No, that's core. There's another
All right.
total instructional time, which includes all time in the school day minus lunch.
Right, so
And
if you think of
previously
a school
recessed.
day, it's 400 minutes long. You subtract out 30 minutes for lunch, because you
Okay.
can't count lunch as part of instructional time. That leaves you 370 minutes in a school day.
So minutes, basically.
Yes,
Okay.
instructional minutes, because
Three-
everything is included as instruction. The resource time that our students have, transition time is considered part of the instructional day. So that's 370 minutes.
And that's instructional, and then the 680 is the core. You're talking about core.
Yes, in a year.
Okay.
Yes. So we're talking about just like within a school
Yeah.
day, if we're trying to figure out how much time we can allocate to recess,
Mhm.
if you take 370 minutes and 15% of that, it's about 50 to 55 minutes. It cannot exceed 50 to 55 minutes.
And what are they doing now, basically?
The expectation right now is at least 20 minutes of recess. Many of our schools exceed that currently.
But the expectation, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here, because this has been a real source of confusion for a lot of people. I want to make sure that we understand that this 50 minutes, for example, is independent of what they currently get.
No,
So-
it's not
No,
20
that's-
plus
that's
50.
total.
It is not.
The-
It's,
the-
it's,
Okay, so what they currently get, which is not part of the instructional day, that is being calculated in your calculations.
So before, you could not count recess as part of the instructional day.
Right.
The new law allows you to. So where we have 400 minutes in a school day, we subtract 30 minutes out for lunch because that is not considered part of instruction. Before, we used to have to count recess out of that time as well.
Okay,
Because it
so
wasn't considered instruction. Now we can include it in the instructional day.
Okay, so instead of saying 30 minutes for lunch, it was 30 minutes for lunch and say 30 minutes for recess. That's how you calculated it before, is that correct? Before you counted instructional minutes?
yes, when we were having to calculate the 990 hours that we are required to have of total instructional time for elementary schools. That's the requirement, 180 days or 990 hours of instruction. Before, we had to subtract out the time for lunch and the time for recess. And so now what the state's saying is that the time for recess can be counted as instructional time toward that 990 hours, not toward the core instructional time of 680 hours. That is,
We have to meet that.
that we have to meet that, because you've got to remember, in addition to math, science, English, and social studies, we also have resource class that's counted in the 990 hours, but is not counted in the 680 hours.
So basically, it allows you to go up to 55 minutes. Is that what you're saying? The bill basically allows 55 minutes of
Yes.
unstructured
Yes.
recess time or whatever. Okay, the question is how you do that, but that's the law. That's what they're
Yes.
suggesting. Okay.
Yes, and the other piece that I would share is if we were to go up to 50 or 55 minutes, one of the things that we have to realize is as a division with the fact that we just missed 4 days, we use bank time to meet our 990. Well, the additional recess time wouldn't affect that 990. The additional recess time, if you went up to 50 or 55 minutes, could impact that 670 or 680. Thank you. Could impact that number, because that number is that just includes the time for English, math, science, and social studies. And so we count on bank time to allow us to meet the requirements when we have snow or when we have incidents like we had last week.
And you said the average is like, did you say average of 20 minutes a day now is what they're doing? Did you say 30? What was
We've
kind of,
always had a standard that it would be a minimum of 20 minutes.
okay.
But I will say part of that data that I was looking at and collecting was to see, because at each grade level, it varies. A school is allowed to allocate that time. But the division expectation was 20 minutes. Many of our schools exceeded that. And then they also build in other times during the day for children to have movement. But is not as the same as defined as recess.
I mean, when this was first started to be talked about, I was hearing a lot of adding 20 minutes, adding 20 minutes, adding
Right.
20 minutes. So if you're at 20 minutes now, we're really in reality looking at 40 minutes as opposed to 55.
Well, we wanted to make sure when we met with the principals this summer, in May, we felt comfortable that we could probably move to 30 minutes, but the state allows us to do more than that. And we really wanted the opportunity to have our parents' input and our teachers' input into that decision. And so that's why we made the decision to make the committee, because it is more than 30 minutes. We can consider that, but there are some things, as Dr. Guy just shared, that we have to take into consideration.
Sure.
I have a comment because I'm sitting here listening to this and I'm thinking, okay, and I came in on the beginning of your presentation about student data and successes and the energy that goes into what the state expects us to do, and then what we as a division set of goals, and the energy and the work that goes into strategies to figure out the comments that the board had and questions about how do we tackle these little areas where we need to improve. Always trying to find ways to improve. Mr. Mentor used to say it well, the state likes to pass something that's an unfunded mandate or an unfunded something, and they throw something out at us. So here's the state saying, we want you to be here, we want you to improve, we want you to concentrate on student learning, but then they throw out this bill that in my mind you said spent a chunk of your summer working on, and I'm listening to all of this just going into this shall we can type thing, and I'm thinking to myself, where do we as a division want to put our energy? I don't want to talk about recess and put this much energy into talking about this. We know our schools are doing what is working well, and can it be a discussion at a principals meeting to say, hey, okay, there's this bill that passed. Some of you at different grade levels are doing different things, but at the end of the day, we concentrate our energies on student learning. I have yet to hear anybody in the community in my district or anybody else's, except for a half a dozen, a few folks that hit social media, that talked about this subject. So in my mind, and I always like throwing things out to make people think, and that is, do we spend our energy and time and summer and hours and days and weeks of our staff working on something like this, or do we concentrate on the data that was just getting delivered to us to say, how do we tackle students with disabilities or subgroups? How do we get our 90% or above? To me, I'm sitting here thinking, thank you for the work you did on this, because it was tasked to be done, I guess. At the end of the day, for me, waste of time.
We spend our time on this because this has a direct correlation on our performance. And as good as
Haven't seen it.
read the research. You're not reading the research.
I don't see it.
I sent you research. You obviously didn't read it,
I don't see
which
it.
doesn't surprise me.
Chair, comment?
Yes.
I don't crunch numbers. I applaud you all who do crunch numbers. I'm going back to last school year when this bill became a reality. And it is a reality, something we have to do with this funded and
We
unfunded.
don't have
That's
to
a
do it, it's just
rea-
shall.
We're gonna
The
do it.
the point I'm trying to get at is, if we do it, I thought we ended the last school year saying, let's evaluate what we are doing to see where it falls in line with what the new bill is asking us to do. I call myself going to our website looking for a survey, and I couldn't find it, so I have yet to see one. I would like to see one. So the results of the survey is asking us whether or not, we're asking parents how much time. What do we want to come out of the survey? What questions are we asking in the survey to help us get to understanding what we're doing and where we're going to go from here? Because I thought I heard the answer to that question in one of your last comments about whether it be this many minutes for recess versus this many minutes. Was a survey to ask parents how much time they felt we should have in recess, or are we still, as administrators, looking at what we already have in place with you all with the understanding of the crunching the numbers and what applies here and what applies there to say we can increase the school day or do whatever to offer this. I kind of got lost in the muck and the mire where we are and what's the purpose of
Well,
all of this.
Right, well, the purpose of the committee, that's a lot of the committee's work, to dive into all those details
Right.
and to make some decisions so they can do a decision analysis and look at what's some
I can
criteria
see
that we
I can
have.
see the committee coming forward with that.
Right,
So now where does the survey fall in?
And the
And
survey,
what,
because ultimately, even within our strategic plan, we look to get input from our community. In the past, with the literacy model, we did focus groups at each school. But even if you do focus groups, you're still getting a very small number of parents providing input. So we were looking at an opportunity that would provide a large number, all of our K-5 parents, the opportunity to provide feedback. It was important for us to look at it by grade level, because one of the things that we wanted to see was, did our parents of primary grades have a different perception than our parents of 3 through 5?
Okay.
Was it more important for primary parents than it was for 3-5? And maybe the data will say that there is no difference between the different grade levels, but that was one of the pieces of information that we wanted to find out from our community. We have done things in the past where we thought we had large committees, we had lots of representation, and we thought that we had the pulse of our community, and we didn't have that. And so that's what was important to us with the survey, is just getting the pulse of our community, and also so that we had a real sense of what their feelings were, so that we didn't.
I think that's in the research as well.
Yeah.
I think one of the recommendations was to put together,
It talks about engaging the school community to support recess, and it gives 3 specific strategies to involve parents in the process. So, and our strategic plan also talks about that.
Yeah.
So we felt like it was really important. The principals and myself thought it was really important to involve them in this.
Can we get a copy of that? by
Absolutely.
chance?
Good copy.
Just one more quick question. So in your slide, you said that you were going to do a decision analysis to come up with a recommendation and make a proposal.
Yes, sir.
Where does the board fit in on that decision-making process? Because I would like to,
I don't believe it's in policy, Ms. Economo,
As far as,
this recess time.
it is, no, it's a certain amount that's allowed per statute, but no, it's not something that the board would say this much goes to this much goes to this.
so we can't make recommendations or suggest alternatives based on what you propose? Is that?
We'd
is that
have to
what I'm
ultimately
hearing?
approve it. I mean,
It wouldn't, just like you don't.
Can I suggest something? If we could let the committee do their work and let them dive into that information, let us bring forth the information back to you once we have that decision, and then you all may feel a little differently about what we come up with. But I think it's premature to worry about saying no, or we're not going to do this, or we're only going to adjust it, whatever. Let the committee do their work. They've done a great job with it now. We've got good objective people in that committee. My recommendation would be let the committee move forward, and we'll bring that information back to the board.
And I think that would be the appropriate time for us to discuss
yeah,
that once we find out what the committee recommends.
I think there'll be time for input.
All right, and just to move on, because we do have another meeting to start here shortly, our next agenda item is the
Thank
school
you, folks.
administration update.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms.
And
Skinner.
thank you, Ms.
Appreciate
Skinner,
it.
for that update and all your work on that. Thank you.
All right, no pressure, Dr. Butler.
Where you going?
But go.
Where are you going?
Dr. Aaron Butler is now Director of School Administration. He's going to provide information, board members, that you requested related to York County School Division discipline, crime, and violence report, specifically short-term suspension data. I'll turn it over to Dr. Butler.
Mr. Richardson, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor, thank you for this opportunity to present information concerning the discipline, crime, and violence report submission for the past 2 school years. The Code of Virginia requires school divisions to submit data on incidents of discipline, crime, and violence, also referred to as DCV, to comply with federal requirements in the Gun-Free Schools Act of 1994 and to comply with federal requirements in the Individuals with Disabilities Act, which is IDEA. Under the Gun-Free Schools Act, every school division on an annual basis must submit the number of students suspended or expelled for possessing or bringing firearms onto school property. Under IDEA, annual reporting of disciplinary actions involving students with disabilities must also be reported. When we look at 2016-17 school year and the 2017-2018 school year, we'll see that the number of reportable offenses to the Virginia Department of Education was 1,682. This involves all disciplinary actions that involve a half to a full day of in-school suspension, a short-term suspension of 1 to 10 school days, or a long-term suspension of 11 to 364 days, and any expulsions, which would have been 365 days. We see for 2017-18 that there was a decline in that from 1,682 to 1,196, which was a reduction of 486. When we look at the number of unique incidents of out-of-school suspension, and to define that number, the Department of Education defines that as for every violation of the code of conduct that was reported, that constitutes one unique suspension. So if a student had 2 violations, one for, let's say they had tobacco in their possession and they had also used profanity in the school building, both of those would represent one individual incident of suspension. So in essence, that still would have 2 violations. And so for that number 916, that is every violation that resulted in a suspension. And we can see for 2016-17, there was 916, and there was a 91 reduction between that year and 2017-18, because it went down to 825 about reportable offenses. And when we break it down by grade level, we can see that back in 2016-17, there were 364 unique out-of-school suspensions at the elementary level. And then in 2017-2018, there were 353, a reduction of 11. For middle school, 243 compared to 237, a reduction of 6. And then the high school level was the greatest, from 309 to 235, which is a reduction of 74. We look at suspensions by gender and we compare the 2 school years. We'll see in 2016-17, although male students make up roughly 50% of our student population, and that year they made up 77% of all students who received an out-of-school suspension, compared to only 23% of female students. In 2017-18, we see that they made up 81% of all students who received a short-term suspension, and only 19% was female. When we compare disproportionality looking at ethnicity, and to define disproportionality, we can see that you look at the enrollment of a particular group in a school population, and then you compare it to the percentage of suspension by that same group. So when we look at 2016-17, we can see that Black students made up 13% of the overall York County school population. Hispanic students made up 10%. White students made up 62%. And then you see the gray, Asian students made up 6%. And then students with 2 or more races made up 13%. When we look at the number of suspensions, you can see that while Black students made up 13% of the overall population, they made up 29% of all out-of-school suspensions. Hispanic students made up 9%, white students made up 49%, Asian students made up 1%, and then we see students with 2 or more races made up 15%. When we compare that to last school year, which was 17-18, we can see that the population distribution is very similar to 2016-17, but we do see some slight reductions. You can see that for the number of Black students, whereas the year before they made up 29% of all the out-of-school suspensions, it went down to 24%, getting it closer to being more proportionate to their overall population. We can see also that the number of Hispanic students went down. There was a slight increase in students with 2 or more races with their percentage of out-of-school suspensions. I'm looking forward to the November strategic plan report update. When we come for that meeting, I'll be providing an update on professional development opportunities that we've been using to address disproportionality and out-of-school suspension and exclusionary practices. We'll also be talking about the Virginia Tiered System of Supports, which is called BTSS, and Positive Behavior Intervention Systems. York County was accepted into the Virginia Department of Education Cohort 5 for BTSS, and so that enables us to receive coaching from both the TTAC at William & Mary and the RIC Center, which is the Resource and Intervention Center at Virginia Commonwealth University. And those individuals will be working with us. We also receive grant funding to work with more professional development with our staff in the buildings. As part of the Title IV-A grant, which is a part of the Every Student Succeed Act, or ESSA, we have some additional funding that will allow for professional development and also funding to provide different activities for our staff to look more at how are we excluding students and then how are we reintegrating them back into the school environment. We were able to pilot last school year something called the School-Wide Information System, which is called SWIS. And just as you can look for academics and you can actually drill down and see, which grade levels or which students are having problems academically, SWIS lets you drill down when it comes to discipline behavior. So you can look down and see which times of the day are you having the most infractions, what particular infractions, are there certain hours of the day, are there certain locations in the building, and then you're able to create a hypothesis to decide how are we going to address those specific issues, and is it certain interventions that need to be taken place. Restorative practices is another thing I will be providing an update on. We've been using some restorative practices from the Virginia Department of Education. I look forward to sharing with you some of the training we've done and some of the next steps we're looking at doing in our division. And then finally, I would like to highlight some of our pilot schools that have been using SWIS and restorative practices, look at how they have been addressing matters of disproportionality and exclusionary practices in their particular schools. So thank you for this opportunity to provide an update on the Discipline, Crime, and Violence report for the last 2 years. I'm available for questions at this time.
Are we able to look at this interesting data, and very interesting data, across the individual schools? Because this is middle and high school, or is this all 19 schools?
Oh, that's all 19 schools.
So we're able to look at some of this data individually, school by school, to see if there's a concern in certain schools, or and this is just a future question, because I know we can't even engage that tonight, but it'd be interesting to see how it breaks out school by school.
Well, under the new reporting standards by the Virginia Department of Education, all this information is now available, so you can at this very time go into the Department of Education site and click on any school, and it will bring up all this data.
Oh, okay.
It's under the school quality profile, and it breaks it down. It's called Learning Climate, and it breaks down out of school suspension. It breaks down the type of violations at that particular school, even attendance rates at that school.
Okay,
I've got the link, I'll forward it to
okay,
you.
okay,
So,
fantastic.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Butler, for that presentation. Appreciate it. And there's no further questions. We have a regular meeting upstairs, so this meeting will be adjourned. Have a great week.